picture a minute. Fabulous.
And that's before you even said anything.
I think I'll leave.
Well, on behalf of the Kennedy School and the Institute of Politics, I'm delighted to welcome all of you to this afternoon's forum. I'm Albert Carnesale, the Dean of the school. Our speaker this afternoon burst upon the national scene about 4 years ago with a keynote speech at the 1988 Democratic National Convention in Atlanta. Displayed a sharp Texan wit that caught all of us. And Barry Goldwater said, she was funny. Funnier than hell. I'd like to listen to the Texas gal anytime she wants to talk. Close quote. But she was hardly a newcomer to politics in 1988. A longtime volunteer in Democratic politics, elected as a county commissioner, elected as state treasurer, the first woman to be elected to statewide office in Texas in more than 50 years at the time. And in 1990, after a tough campaign that people followed nationally, was elected governor of the state of Texas. But our speaker is more than a resume, something that one might not ordinarily mention if our speaker was a man. was the notion of bringing up 4 children and seeing grandchildren. And the reason you wouldn't normally mention it if the speaker was a man is because you'd know that his wife did it. In this case, this was done by the same person that has had and is having the extraordinary political career that is more often noted and that we more often talk about. Throughout her career, she's shown a strong commitment to improving the lives of minorities and women. As county commissioner, she started a rape crisis center, a center for battered women, and an infant parent training program. She's actively recruited minorities and women and initiated flexible work schedules so that some people might be able to work in government that might not otherwise be able to do so. As state treasurer, she fought successfully to eliminate many of the inefficiencies in government and saved Texas many, many millions of dollars simply by improving cash management. As governor, she's pursued an activist course, taking on bloated state agencies in the insurance industry, hazardous waste disposal practices, and perhaps toughest of all, ethical standards for lobbyists. She's no Don Quixote, or more appropriately, no Donna Quixote, a pragmatic leader who really does bring life to the notion of politics as the art of the possible. Our speaker today was born with neither a silver spoon nor a silver foot in her mouth, but rather she has earned an international reputation as a silver-tongued orator. And I'm privileged to present to you the governor of the great state of Texas, Governor Ann Whitney.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you very much, Al. Some man fixed this deal up here. Just teasing, I was just kidding. Well, he's still at work. Well, yeah, he did. Wait a minute. No, wait a minute. No, wait a minute. Here we go. I love it when someone says I burst on the scene. The most exciting offer I've had lately was someone who was planning a big event and wanted to know if I would jump out of a cake. Maybe I burst out of a cake. I declined. I said anyone 59 years old didn't jump out of cakes. I didn't think governors jumped out of cakes. Can you imagine them asking Governor Weld to jump out of a cake? I want to show this wonderful shirt I was just given backstage. It says on the front, Texas Crimson. I'm sure my stock is going to go up on the hike and bike trail wearing this shirt. And I'm glad to know that Harvard has some smart people here. I see a lot of people that I know, and Ellen Goodman, the columnist, does us honor by being here today. So write something good, Ellen. The former lieutenant governor, it's a pleasure to see you. Linda Wilson, who introduced me earlier. I spoke to what was a brown bag lunch, and she was kind enough to say nice things about me. And Bob Farmer is here, and I have to say something good about Bob Farmer because he raises lots of money for people who run for political office, including me. Good to see you, Bob. I truly feel almost overwhelmed with the desire to communicate my thoughts cogently today. I want to be profound and insightful. I want to show the prismatic nature of my mind. For after all, I am at Harvard, the font at which the learned sip. And then I decided to abandon all pretense for this very reason that I am at Harvard, and I might as well play it straight. As my friend Jim Hightower says, you can put lipstick on a hog and call it Monique, but it is still a pig. And so, as honored as I am to be here, I'm a little daunted by the history of the place and the scholarly level of pursuit that permeates its halls. What I do offer is the experience of a political participant of very long standing, a public servant that is still idealistic about government, and a mother and a grandmother who knows as a matter of fact that no matter how bad nor how good it gets, this too will pass. And so I am going to talk to you directly, and I feel like I'm among friends, and I could probably just stand here and chat casually, but since they're putting it maybe on C-SPAN, I need to sound like I really know something important. I want to begin by telling a story that I've used a lot over the past year. Last spring I was on a ranch. I'd gone turkey hunting out in West Texas, and we were visiting another ranch where they had shot lonesome dove, and I wanted to go to the set and see the bend in the river and all of that. And as we were waiting for our ride back to the other ranch, I was left alone for a few minutes, which is an uncommon occurrence for me nowadays. And I was standing there by a ranch foreman who kind of hesitantly came over and asked me for an autograph. Now, I have a lot of friends who are interested in my life and what I'm doing, but ranch foremen over the age of 65 really are not on the cutting edge of those who want autographs. He, by his look and his manner, was every much the real thing. He was a Texan who had put his life and his heart into the land and never strayed far from literally what was home on the range. He stood there shyly in a sort of courtly manner, and he held out what we used to call a nickel spiral notebook. No telling what it costs now. And while I was writing, he said, "I can't even imagine what a great honor it must be to be called the governor of Texas." And when I looked up at him, he had just a hint of tears in his eyes. And I just can't begin to explain how deeply that touched me, how it really pulled me up short. He's right, of course, it is an enormous honor. But I rarely think of what I do that way. Being governor is my job. It's one that I worked very hard to get, and it's one that I work hard at every day. But I remember the incident, and I tell you this story because it reminds me that most people don't see the hard work that is a part of this job. They see the ceremony, and they see the trappings, they see the showcase moments of office, and they rarely see the frantic kind of balancing act that goes on as we try to meet rising expectations with fewer and fewer resources. And so for those of you here at this Kennedy institution that is trying to sort out what makes sense out of public policy, I am for a little while going to talk with you about the perspective of it from the governor's chair in the state of Texas. For all of you that study it, the rise of the new federalism and the scramble of state governments to keep pace is an old story. But for those of us who are in office, the story is as new as next year's budget cycle. In fact, we've gotten to the point where our spending is determined not by the legislatures in the state and not by the governors of the states, but by the federal governments and federal courts and sometimes state court mandates. For instance, this August I read an indignant article in the Wall Street Journal that suggested that while even the Postal Service, for heaven's sake, is downsizing, state government and local governments are piling on new employees at an outrageous rate, and Texas was listed as the worst offender with 30,000 new public jobs. Well, I was horrified. I called my staff in. I wanted to know where those 30,000 people were. I mean, heads were going to roll, or at least some teeth were going to be rattled. But the facts turned out to be a little different. Now, far be it for me to suggest that the Wall Street Journal could make a mistake. But first, I want to own up that there were 21,000, not 30,000, new public jobs, counting federal, state, and local government jobs. Now, there were actually only 3,119 new jobs at the state level. But here's the kicker. The greatest growth in state government occurred in human services, prisons, and mental health, all areas that are under federal or court mandate. For instance, the federal government changed the eligibility standards on Medicaid, a laudable policy. But that change required 1,716 new employees in Texas to handle the increased caseload. Federal court orders to reduce crowding of our prisons required 1,000 new correctional jobs, not to mention the construction of more than 25,000 new prison beds at the cost of several $billion in bonds and several $100 million more in operating expenses. It's not that any of these mandates are wrong or even wrong-headed. It is that every one of them requires new spending and requires someone else, not the courts, not the Congress, to come up with the cash. It may sound innocent enough, but think about it. What we are doing is separating the power to make policy from the responsibility to pay for it. Now, if you subtract all of those jobs I mentioned from the total, you actually come out with a net reduction in state jobs of more than 2%. Now, among those of us in government, there's no secret here about what's going on. And so if I could very quickly give you a review, and I know when you start talking about federal economics and federal governments and mandates, your eyes begin to roll back in your head. And you think, oh, it's so complicated. I mean, it is as if foreign policy is complicated. Well, none of it really is. I mean, all of us are capable of seeing through and understanding what's going on. So I want to distill it, if I may, so that you can clearly understand what's taking place at the federal level. If you add defense spending, interest on the debt, and entitlement programs, all available revenue for the federal government is spent. That's it. Every dime that comes into Washington, D.C. is spent on those three. So if there is any money that you're going to spend on any additional or new or innovative programs, guess what? It requires cuts or new taxation. So the obvious result is that any future national problems or any addition to national approaches is going to be pushed down to local government with more mandates and require more local tax increases, while all those in Washington are playing me no Alamo, me no Goliad. You understand? I wasn't there. I wasn't there when it happened. Now, during 12 years of theoretically tight-fisted Republican thrift, the federal government has quadrupled the national debt. The federal government currently spends 27% more than it takes in, and 14 cents of every dollar it spends go to do nothing more than pay the interest on the federal debt. So forget checking that little box that says 10% on your income tax. You're already paying 14. You understand? What a joke. It's like Herman Talmadge said, virtually everything is under federal control nowadays except the federal budget. The fact is that all of our budgeting is now based on what is and what was, and not, as George Bernard Shaw and Robert Kennedy used to say, on what can be. We know, for instance, that old people would rather stay at home and live independently for as long as they possibly can. My folks are 83 years old. They own their own home. It is paid for. It does not cost a dime. They would like to live there for as long as they can because they feel security there and they feel some familiar surroundings. And we know that home health care workers are much cheaper than nursing homes or institutional care. Somebody that just comes by and checks to make sure you're okay, gives you a hot meal. And yet, as our population ages, do we double the number of home health care workers? Well, no, we don't, because Medicare and Medicaid won't pay for it. They will pay for institutional care. It will pay for nursing home care. And so what do we do of necessity on the state level? But we go where the money is, even though it is ineffective policy and is more expensive than the alternatives. And as a result of these actions, we've gotten to the point where we are perpetuating a fraud when we talk about state government budgets. Because by the time we pay for federal government mandates and the court mandates and constitutional requirements, we in Texas control 16% of our money. And while we are hamstrung, our city and county governments are also caught in this same federal pinch. In Texas, federal aid to our 10 largest cities dropped from a high of $360 million in 1980 to $183 million in 1990. It is a frustrating situation, and one that has made many an elected leader feel caught in a real vice, and has made too many taxpayers feel like they're being taken to the cleaners, and it's hard to blame them for feeling that way. They're at the receiving end of what is the biggest Rube Goldberg operation that has been created in the last few years. An enormous contraption with every bell and whistle blowing full blast while all the levers and pulleys push the work down to the states, down to the cities, down to the counties, down to the street, where, as far as the taxpayers are concerned, precious little worth bragging about is happening. The truth is, our governments exist in a state of adversarial combat. And we are so desperate for dollars, for jobs, for anything that will help us meet the needs of our people that we are more than ready to fight. At the state level, the fight for that 16% of discretionary spending is literally viewed as life and death battle. Oh, sure, there are the reams of mind-numbing forms that would put an IRS agent to sleep. There are the endless goals and priorities and measurements that seem to ask, how did you count your beans, so that we can tell whether you cooked them or not, and whether they were cooked to the appropriate tenderness. In the immortal words of David Stockman, none of us really understands what's going on with all these numbers. But no matter what you do, it always seems to get down to questions like, would you rather throw people out of nursing homes or take food out of the mouths of children? And there's rarely much question of how good a federal program is. The only question is, how do I get it? How do I get it from my state, my city, my district? And if I don't get it, how am I going to explain it to the electorate? We've gotten to the point where we spend so much energy competing with each other that we don't have much left over for the international competition, and that's our real challenge. Maybe Tokyo does compete with Osaka, but I doubt it. I seriously doubt it. And I don't think any of us believe there's any long-term gain in this tribal warfare of city against city, state against state, state against federal government. Common sense tells you that that's a losing proposition. And I believe that the voters understand it and they know it. It's one of the areas where they are way ahead of their elected officials and the so-called experts. For years, they have wondered how their federal government can spend $1,491 billion a year and still can't produce jobs or health care or anything that helps hold families together. They can't believe that we spend that kind of money, and they are still out of work, and their parents are not being cared for, and their children don't have insurance. They see people going without, and then they read that the federal government has sponsored a grant for $2 million to study the nocturnal habits of wood rats. I made that up. But you know what I mean. And they ask themselves, they say, how can this be? And the budget experts, the sophisticates in the know, explain in condescending terms that, of course, these are completely different programs with completely different authorization sources. One really has nothing to do with the other. Well, maybe it's time that something did have to do with the other. In 1868, there was a Russian playwright that wrote that the entire civil service is like a fortress made up of papers and forms and red tape. And the point that I'm making to you today, and I mean it seriously, is that if the bureaucracy is a fortress, the budget process is its first line of defense. Like the Russians, we are being done in by a government everywhere over-bureaucratized, over-managed, over-formed, over-red taped, over-requirements. And there is something wrong and something amiss, my friends, when there are more government workers hired than there are manufacturing jobs created in America. And if we are going to make government more responsive to people's needs, we've got to begin with fundamental change in the way we think about budgets and the way we write them. I hope that we begin a new election cycle that will produce new leadership and new understanding of our common problems and our desperate need to cooperate with each other. Now, you know what my bias is. I hope desperately that Bill Clinton is elected President of the United States. And I hope so for some very practical reasons for the American people. I think that it is time that we have someone in the White House who understands what it is like to be on the receiving end of all of this federal largesse in the form of mandates. Someone who spent time for 3 terms in seeing exactly what the effects are of federal action without the money to pay for it. We hope that every level, White House, courthouse, may begin to realize that we all have a common set of taxpayers. These are the same people that pay federal taxes and pay local taxes. And while we know that so many of our problems are national in scope and therefore require national solutions, we can do our best at every level to make some sense out of our process. There are a number of books being written. David Osborne talking about the innovations that are taking place in local government. And it is true that they are, but it is not out of simple creativity. It is out of absolute desperation. Alice Rivlin has written a book that I'm sure some of you have seen that talk about re-examining the whole structure within the federalist system to determine how we can create some cooperative agreement between our governments. We're doing our damnedest in Texas to examine every program and function by asking 4 questions. Does it improve our kids' education? Does it contribute to the health and safety of our people? Does it help create good private sector jobs? And do the people want it and need it? Now that's pretty simple. And we let it be known that if the answer is not a firm yes to at least one of those questions, that program or that expenditure is going to have a hard time making it into a budget that has no room for niceties and extras. After almost 2 years of demanding the use of these questions, I want to testify to you that it is not easy, even with the best of intentions and a governor that keeps pressing for change. Last session, I told the legislature, do not give me any more power. Don't give me any more appointments to make. Do not give me any more agencies to deal with. I ended up with 215 new appointments to make. So you see, old habits die hard, and painless fixes rarely present themselves. We can't, as some would suggest, find the money for everything by cutting waste. Nor can we afford in this economy to find new dollars in huge tax increases. But we can do everything in our power to make the most out of the dollars we've got, and we have not examined our actions through that light. After all these years of looking for Washington for help, I think it is time for us to recognize that even if there is a change in direction and an onset of good intentions, Washington will have its plate full getting its own house in order for many years to come. And we will have to find solutions at both the national and the state level, and perhaps create a new federalism that really is worthy of the name new. And that's where all of you come in. The truth is that those of us who hold elective office come to that position with ideas of our own. But if we have done the job right, a big part of our success involves plowing the ground for people like you, giving you the fertile soil in which new ideas and new solutions can flourish. You are energetic enough, idealistic enough not to be afraid of change. You are part of an exciting technological time in which change is the norm. And the exciting part is that you are going to enter the government process and bring that idealism and insistence for change with you. And now, what seems like another lifetime, President Kennedy took the oath of office and he called to a new generation of leadership. My husband and I heard that call, and we went to Washington so that he could work in the Kennedy Civil Rights Commission. And later we returned to Texas determined to change politics and change the lives of Texans for the better. And now, almost 32 years later, I've seen a lot of change, and I've helped cause some of it. And I can tell you that despite the frustrations and the disappointments, which are many, there is no work that is more rewarding than public service. You may go somewhere else and you may make a lot of money, but you will never receive the kind of gratification that you receive from looking someone in the eye who says, "Thank you for helping make my life better." John and Robert Kennedy told us that this is a noble business. And if the nobility seems hard to find beneath the headlines, don't worry about it. Cynicism has always been there. The media will always be there. But the system will always be there waiting for you to breathe new life into it. If our problems now seem larger and more daunting, that only gives you greater opportunity for success. We need you desperately. We need your youth. We need your energy. We need your enthusiasm. We need you to rekindle our sense of the possibilities Yes, it's an honor. It is a great honor to hold public office, but it's also a big job. Just as every generation has, you and I have a job to do for this nation. And what possible greater pursuit could we dedicate our lives to than making this nation of ours a better one? God bless you, and thank you very much.
Thank you. Governor Richards will answer some questions. There are microphones here, here, and 2 on the next floor. If you would go to the microphones, and if people would please identify themselves and then ask short questions, that would be helpful. So let me start right here.
Governor Richards, we are thrilled for you to be here. My name is Tamar Shea. I'm a senior at the college. I have a question. What advice did you give to the women who are running in races across the nation when you were at the Democratic Convention, and what did your granddaughter say to you after you spoke at the convention?
I didn't pay her to ask that. Because it's a good story. My granddaughter is, of course, very bright and has been around the public eye for a while. And not long ago, I took her down to SeaWorld in San Antonio, and she had a wonderful time. And so after the speech, we went out, even though it was very late, and Lily said, "Mammy, you know, I wasn't afraid when all those reporters were over there with those cameras and all those microphones. I wasn't afraid of all those people." And I said, "Well, Lily, you're so courageous." She said, "And Mammy, I wasn't afraid either when you took me down and they put me on the back of that whale." And it dawned on me that this child thinks of her grandmother in relation to moments of stark terror. When I was much younger, I gave everyone good advice. And I don't do that much anymore unless I'm asked for it. Because I just felt like, well, it got me in trouble, and they didn't do what I told them to anyway. But I do advise women a lot about running for public office when they ask me. And it is a craft. I told a group earlier today of faculty that this is an almost schizophrenic life, because the talents that it takes to be elected to public office are entirely different than the talents it takes to serve in public office. And not very many of us are good at both. I like serving better than I like running, but I think I'm probably better at running than I am serving, you know? And I tell women that, oh boy, I want this to come out right. I tell women that it is time for them to think of it as a craft. Women think that they have to do everything. I mean, we've got to be able to mop and sweep and wash the dishes and make the telephone calls and herd the children all at the same time. And I think we have a tendency in politics to think that we have to run our campaigns, we have to be media experts, and yet we have to be on the road all the time, and we have to be a perfect hostess, wife, and mother in the process. And something's going to give. And what will probably give is the campaign itself, and you as a candidate. As a candidate, you must think of yourself as a commodity that is out there, that must be alert, that must be bright, that looks like it's having the time of its life. And And all of the logistics and the management and all of that has got to be done by someone else. And if you can't let go of it, you're not going to be very good in public office. So I urge women to allow themselves to be the candidate and allow others to run the campaign. Now, that doesn't mean, you know, that you're some fool that does anything they tell you to do. But it does mean that you don't hang on to every little teeny bit of it, because between being the candidate and raising the money, and the candidate is the best money raiser in the campaign, you really don't have time to be anything else. And if your family and your friends think that you've got time for a bridge game or you've got time to go fishing, well, forget it, Gladys, that's over, you know. If you're serious about what you're doing. And generally, that's my advice. The three things that matter the most in getting elected to public office is money, money, and money. And if you can't raise the money, then I think you ought to give your help and support to someone who can, because that's what it takes. In Texas, it took me $14 million. And I'm not, you know, I'm not even close to wealthy. And I raised that money, along with an awful lot of friends and a lot of you in this room who sent me checks. This is a tough business. Well, I went on too long. Yes, ma'am.
Hi, Governor Richards. My name is Jennifer Measy, and I'm a second-year MPP at the Kennedy School. In your political career, have you found that you've had to compromise a lot in terms of advocating for women's issues, but still not wanting to be marginalized and not listened to when you talk about other things? And do you think that that's going to change as more women are running for state office and hopefully winning state office and hopefully one day the presidency?
No, I've never compromised my feelings or my position where women are concerned. It hasn't been necessary. Sometimes, though, I think because we are women and we reproduce, that they think all we know about is having babies or not having babies, or under what circumstances, and you know, that gets a little boring after a while, at least to me. I'm impatient with the whole idea of women's issues simply because we do reproduce. Women's issues are the issues that affect all human beings. Retirement is a woman's issue. Jobs and good pay are women's issues. Health care is a woman's issue. Education, both when you're young and in your later life, are women's issues. So to compartmentalize us into some sort of creature that doesn't know anything beyond reproduction, child care, or nursing would suggest that we haven't advanced very much since my youth some 50 years ago. But as far as, I mean, everybody knows where I stand on women's issues. I like, though, to think that we are allowing men to take on women's issues. It broadens them. It gives them a, you know, I'm very serious about that. In this political time, we've shown that we have a lot of political clout. Why should we hog all the women's votes? Why shouldn't we allow men the opportunity to adopt some positions that would allow them to get women's votes too? You understand? And then it's a win-win. It not only broadens their base, but broadens our agenda. In fact, I can't even think of an issue that is a big controversy in Texas that you would describe as a, quote, feminist issue, now that I'm governor. They just don't even raise them, you know.
Hi, Governor Richards.
Hi.
Up here. My name is Jeff Miller, and I'm a freshman at the college.
How are you?
Good. I was curious how you feel Ross Perot's re-entry into the race will affect the election and who you think will carry Texas.
I really know nothing about the rest of the country because I haven't seen any numbers. I understand this business of running for office, and the numbers tell it, but not any numbers. You know, you've got to be sure of the quality of your polling, the quality of how it was done, and all of that. So I can't comment on what effect Ross might have for the rest of the country. I can tell you that in Texas, that I feel very strongly that he is going to help Bill Clinton as a consequence of his re-entry into the race. It's more of a gut instinct than it is anything else. It is because there are people who voted for Reagan, who voted for Bush, who cannot believe that they're broke. And now the question is whether or not they can go all the way over to Bill Clinton or not. You understand? And I think Ross Perot gives them a sort of safe haven. I think we have a chance at winning Texas. If we win Texas, shut out the lights, it's over, you know? I do not think that this campaign has, its results are evident yet. I think that the populace really begins to pay attention in the last 2 weeks before the election. There's nothing new or wise about that. It's just real. And what is really going to matter is the person who really kicks in the momentum at the last. I think that Clinton has the capacity to do that. I hope that that occurs, and I will sleep a little better at night knowing that he's in the White House. Anybody else? Over here?
Good afternoon, Governor. My name is Walter Dean. I'm in the mid-career program here at the Kennedy School. I wanted to ask you, I'd read something recently that when you first became governor, one of your first tasks was to clean out the Department of Commerce in Texas, which your predecessor had built up and established. You sent someone there who I think later became known as the Angel of Death, Richard Moya, with the job to remove all of the Republican employees.
Well, that's what the Republican employees said.
I'm sorry. The article that I read said that all of the people that have been let go happened to be then Republican, and they were all replaced with Democrats. My question is, if you think that how one can justify removing people's jobs based on their party affiliation, and what was done to help the people that lost their jobs to find new positions.
Well, it's probably inappropriate for me to comment at length because we are in a lawsuit, because we've been sued by a few of those employees. The short answer is there is no justification for firing people for their affiliation, and that was not done in this instance. Yes.
Governor Richards, my name is Margaret Alcon. I'm a first-year MPP student here at the Kennedy School. And I was very pleased to see you elected governor of Texas.
Thank you.
Very disturbed that support for the death penalty seems to be a prerequisite to becoming governor of Texas. And considering the fact that the death penalty is disproportionately put upon poor and minority members of society, considering the fact that innocent men like Randall Dale Adams and Clarence Bradley Black have been convicted, sentenced to the death penalty, and then within hours of the sentence being carried out, discovered to be innocent, and considering that the appellate process that tries to protect people like these two innocent men is more expensive than just keeping people in prison for the rest of their lives, how do you justify your position in support of the death penalty?
The death penalty is a law in the state of Texas. The death penalty is accepted by a vast majority of the people there, and there is not a chance in the world that a repeal of the death penalty would pass the Texas legislature. Yep, somebody over here.
Governor,
Yes.
Governor, my name is Frank Dwyer. I'm a mid-career student here. An economist writing in the New York Times business section 2 weeks ago, and as we know, the Times doesn't lie, suggested that Mr. Clinton's plan for defense cuts would cost your state 120,000 jobs, and equally, Mr. Bush's plan would cost your state 80,000 jobs. Given the present state of growth in the job market, as the person who has to receive those cuts, would you prefer that they be postponed until such times as the economy had greater stimulus? And how do you see your state absorbing those families and providing health care for them?
Well, what we have done is that we began 2 years ago putting together a group of people on a task force to examine what you do with the economy in light of the fact that we can expect, as can Massachusetts, California, a number of cutbacks in defense and in the military. I had a meeting in my office with all of the principal defense contractors in the state of Texas. And I asked them specifically, what do we need to begin to do now before the cuts come that will prepare you, prepare your corporations to be able to move to another and more productive kind of manufacturing. In some cases, we were successful in examining, but by and large, most of the companies agreed that they made these particular things, whether they were fighter planes, and that was what their skill was, and that's what they intended to do. So we then asked them if they would cooperate in giving us all of the suppliers, that is, the second line businesses that produce and furnish them the materials that they need to do what they do. And we are now working with those second line manufacturers to expand their businesses so when the cutbacks come to the primary business, it will not be so devastating on the rest of the economy. We also have probably one of the most aggressive job training programs anywhere in the country. Our biggest problem is how to pay for it. We have been able to use JTPA funds for training for jobs that are new, but that money is not available to us because of federal mandates for retraining. And as a consequence, we use every resource that we have in cooperation with the community colleges and with the universities to try to get them into an area where they can learn as they are on the job. It's too late to wait until the cutbacks come. If they show an interest in some other area, then we try to get them plugged in and we try to get them what assistance we can. It really doesn't, you know, this country, the only economic development program it's had from the federal level that I can remember in my lifetime has been defense. And so it is not surprising that as we face these cutbacks that there are going to be real difficulties for states that were dependent on defense, and Texas, Massachusetts, and California, I believe, being the top three. Please do not think that I'm trying to describe some pie in the sky to you, because I am not. I think it is going to be jarring, and I think it is going to be difficult, and I think it's going to take every resource that we have. And it's going to have to take some federal attention.
May I just ask, do you think it would be wiser to wait then until perhaps the overall economy was in slightly better shape before making those cuts?
Well, I hate to say that because I go to Washington and just fight like a dog for every one of those defense contracts. It was just like I tried to say to you in the speech, there's this constant competition between states and between local governments. I wish there could be delays, but in the interest of the economy, I doubt seriously that there will be. Yes, sir.
Yes, Governor.
How
I'm
you
Kenneth
doing?
Walker. How are you? I'm a
I'm
fellow at the Institute of Politics. And I'm wondering, in the search for budgetary solutions, how arguments like shared sacrifice and a fairer distribution of taxes begins to play out in places, I believe like Texas, that have no income tax.
Yeah. Well, you know, everybody says, well, why don't you have an income tax in Texas, and why don't y'all pass one? Well, first, I can't pass one. I mean, it's just absolutely, it just is not going to happen. And I'm pretty pragmatic
I guess my
about
specific
funding.
question is how that plays nationally when we're trying to solve the budget deficit, come up with
Well, but hey,
funds for
income
programs.
tax, you know, it didn't solve California's problems. When I look around the country, everybody's hurting no matter what the sources of their revenues are. So if there is some decision, such as Alice Rivlin suggests, that we will divide between us responsibilities. You know, you take this and pay for it, and we'll take that and pay for it. Then the states are going to have to come up with the resources regardless of what they choose as their source. You understand? And I think that's very much a local government decision. And by local, I mean state. Yes, ma'am.
Governor Richards, my name is Barbara Meister. I'm a first-year student at the Kennedy School, and I'm proud to claim 1 year as a Texas citizen, and in that year had the gracious opportunity to vote for you.
Thank you.
I want to ask you about a policy issue in particular. I know you mentioned federal mandates as a prime issue affecting states and their ability to govern. What I'm particularly wondering about today is the Nafta Agreement.
Mm-hmm.
Have you had a chance to review it? What do you think of it? Is it going to be a positive impact on Texas or a negative?
Mm-hmm.
And broader, what do you think it'll do for the nation as a whole?
The free trade agreement is something I've supported for years, and support with a lot of enthusiasm. And I don't want to fudge with you about it. I think that the free trade agreement is going to benefit Texas probably more than any other state in the union initially. The exports to Mexico from the United States last year were $43 billion, and about a third of that came from Texas. So the opportunities that it offers us, and I believe the nation, are enormous. The mystery to me is the suggestion that the free trade agreement is going to take away jobs. Jobs are leaving America now. Jobs are leaving Texas now. The question is where they're going. We know that economically we benefit if they go to Mexico, but there is not that reciprocal benefit because of the geographical proximity when they go to the Pacific Rim. So if jobs are going to leave, I hope they're going to go to Mexico, because we're going to get some money back from that, because we are the principal exporter of Mexican imports. The other reason that I feel strongly about it is that this is the first time we've been able to get anyone in Washington, other than our own members of Congress and members of the Senate, to pay attention to the problems along the Mexican border. Those problems exist and are growing whether there's a free trade agreement or not. Pollution of the Rio Grande River, the pollution of the air, health problems, job training. We need now. And because of the free trade agreement and the interest of this administration in getting it passed, for the first time, we have been able to get some serious money dedicated to those efforts. When you stop to think that the free trade agreement will mean that we have the largest free trade zone in the world, it ought to tell you that the economic opportunities here are simply extraordinary. And I laugh today, but it's true. Y'all think that just because the Mayflower, you know, came over and landed at Plymouth, that that's the front door to the United States. The front door is just as likely the Rio Grande River. And I firmly believe that this is the opening and the beginning of an enormous opportunity for us to the south, to central and South America that will soon follow.
Hello, Governor Richards.
Hi.
My name is Dawn Martin, and I'm a research assistant at the Kennedy School of Government. And what I wanted to ask was, we all know that the family values issues represents a somewhat defunct political strategy created by the Republican Party. But long before this issue developed into what it was, there was an incredible emphasis in the media on Hillary Clinton's role not only as a mother, a wife, a woman, but also her role in the campaign and the possibility of Bill Clinton's presidency. And I wonder if you thought that was a creation of the media, the voters, or again, the Republican Party strategists.
Well, I don't think it was a creation of the voters. I'm not sure the voters are paying that much attention at this point. Certainly it is undoubtedly a Republican strategy. And, I'm not one of those that knocks the media. I mean, they do their job. My Lord, I wouldn't do it for, They've got to fill that stuff up every single day. I mean, our appetites are insatiable. What would you do if you got the Boston Globe one day and there was nothing on the front page? You would, it is really hard to just grind out those words every single day. And usually about something that you are bored to tears with. Something you've been reporting day after day, and the editor wants one more. And it's the same with television. Same thing. Good news is no news. The only news is controversy, anger, violence, disagreement, sex, what else can I think of? Fun. And so I'm telling you, there are times when I don't watch the news. If I'm feeling kind of low, hey, turn it off. Because, there ain't going to be anything but bloody bodies on the highway. And there's always been this fascination with the wife of whoever. And whether, what she wore, and whether it was long enough, and how high the heels were, and whether or not she tipped her cup at the tea party. That went back a long time ago. And now I think that they have tried to inject something in here that women who have a career, who are bright, who have a profession, who work for a living, that something's wrong with them as mommies. And I think it's backfired. I think that there are so many thousands of us who do work and who do manage to do our job and love our children at the same time, who are really angered by that, because they were talking about us too. They were not just talking about Hillary Clinton. So I don't think it worked, but it gave them something to write. Gave them something to put on the tube. And I just think that, y'all, when you read stories, you have to put your common sense filter, just slip that into your brain, just like you would, the disk into the computer. You've got to filter what matters. Yes, sir.
Governor, I'm Wayne Cox. I'm working on the master's program here in the mid-career program. I used to live in Texas and left there quite a while ago, but one of the people I knew back then was named Robert Rodriguez, and I worked with him in organizing neighborhood councils, and he went on to file a lawsuit on behalf of low-income students throughout the state of Texas to try to get the state finance system to have equal treatment, equal funding for all students, and it's not that way now, as you know.
Yeah.
The federal courts went ahead and agreed with that lawsuit and a subsequent lawsuit. And that's been over 15 years since those courts have agreed to that, but yet the state's school system is still pretty unequally funded. Low-income people, minorities, their students tend to be only get half to sometimes a third the kind of educational support per student as in high-income districts. The state, the state's had several special sessions, no results. Do you see a light out of that dark tunnel?
I don't know. We're going to try another special session, y'all, without getting too complicated about this. The education system in Texas is paid for with property tax. It's collected on the local level, and you know, some property is worth more than other property. So there are districts that are extraordinarily wealthy, and there are districts that are very, very poor, and the poor are taxed a whole lot more because of the low value of the property than those in the rich districts. And so this contest has been in the Supreme Court now for years. We have had, I don't know, I think 9 special sessions trying to resolve it. And we'll pass something, we'll send it over. The Supreme Court says, no, that's not good enough. We want you to do something else. And then we go do what we think they want and send it back, and that's not good. So here's the only way I know to try to get it resolved. In past times, to be able to pass a bill, and I must tell you that it is difficult to pass legislation. It's easy to kill it, but it's difficult to pass it. We have a situation where I've got to get 100 votes in the House to submit any question to the voters. It's a lot of votes to get, especially when you get all the partisan stuff into it, you know, and all the politics. But I think we've got to separate process from money. Always before, we have fought it out in the legislature and we said, okay, here's how we're going to do it, and here's how much money we're going to put into it. I want to get the legislature to pass a process that says here's how we're going to do it, and submit that to the voters. And then in the regular session, come back and put the funding into that plan. Maybe we can do it, but I just can't tell you whether it will work or not. It's not complicated. We've got several choices. We can either take money from the rich districts and some way get it down to the poor districts. I tried to pass a collection system where you took monies from the wealthy property and collected it statewide and redistributed it, which gave us about 97% equity, but I couldn't get that passed. You could constitutionalize the present system, which I don't think I can get 100 votes for. You could pass some sort of new tax, which we can't get 100 votes for. Or you can consolidate school districts, which I guarantee you I can't get 100 votes for. And so I suspect we will use a device of taking monies from the rich areas and through some funding manner filter them through to the poor districts. And no one would like to have that resolved more than me.
Good luck.
Yes, sir. Am I through? Okay.
Governor Richards, my name is Joshua Bloom, class of 1996. You mentioned that you've been doing a lot of hoping that the Governor Clinton will be elected to the presidency. What will you be doing in this last month to make sure that he actually is?
Well, I think I make about 7 states in 3 days next week. And I have a very full schedule in Texas. I don't want to spend too much time outside of Texas. You know, I'm not the governor of America, I'm the governor of Texas. And so I'm going to be spending a lot of time campaigning. I'm hoping to make it up to Washington State, which is not on my agenda. And I'm going to do whatever they want me to do, essentially. I told Bill that I would give them October, except for this little thing here. And so wherever they send me, that's where I'll go.
Hi, I'm up here.
Hi.
My name is Irene Reed, and I'm a first year at the college. And I just wanted to know, you know, we read a lot in the papers today about this being the year of the woman. Do you think that this is a year, or is it something that is going to continue and grow? Is this an indication of something deeper that's changing in America, or do you think that this is just sort of a short, sort of ephemeral thing?
Well, you have to recognize hype when you see it. So I think it's fine that they call it the Year of the Woman. I think it's in recognition of the fact so many women are running for the United States Senate. and that we're probably going to elect 4 or 5 of them. I don't know how many. I think it is here to stay. I don't think it's going to go away. Women bring a certain newness, a certain energy, a certain excitement, but we're no better than men. I mean, we're not super women any more than they are super men. I think that there may be a difference in that we are not so ground down by the system. Our very presence suggests change. They expect, the public expects change from us. I think we bring a certain energy to the whole process, a re-examination of why we're doing things this way, because we're not invested in the way we used to do things. We don't have any pride of ownership in the past because most of us were not much of a part of it. So I think that it is exciting and it brings a new dimension to government. I keep insisting that we shouldn't be surprised that women have insisted on having their own voice at the table. We've been hearing that from our African American and Hispanic and Asian and Native American brothers and sisters for years. That no matter how good-hearted we are, how good our intentions are, you simply cannot see with another's eyes. Living is a great educator. So we can't get out of a book what experience has given. And so until this country truly recognizes that the government ought to reflect the population, or something is going to be left out of decision making, then we really will never have created the democracy it was intended to be. So I think that women, yes, are here to stay, and one of the reasons is that we help each other. We reach back and give to those that we want to help along. That mentoring system is real, and I for one think it's been a long time coming. And my granddaughter Lily is very happy about it all. She might get a shot at the big one. Yes, ma'am.
Welcome, Governor Richards. I'm Deborah Gittin. I'm in my last semester at the college, and I have one very grandiose question, the other not so nearly so. The first is, you've talked a lot about the potential for change. What's your most optimistic vision for change in the near future of this country? If you could implement one sweeping but feasible change in our policy, what would it be?
Mm-hmm.
And I know it's kind of an essay question. I'm sorry. I've been here for a while.
The answer is no.
And the second question is a self-promoting one that I wouldn't ask if I didn't think so many other people here didn't have it, which is, how does one sign up to work for you in Austin?
Oh. Well, you got to take your shot when you have an opportunity, and I never think it's inappropriate if you have an interest that you want to pursue. You ought to ask outright. Who would I write your name down on a piece of paper and give it to Jane Hickey, who's with me, or Bill Cryer, right over here, and put down what you want to do. We'll have somebody get in touch with you. And if I could change one thing about the federal government, it would be the President of the United States.
Just in closing, if I could say, if youth, energy, idealism, knowledge, and inspiration are the necessary qualities for service, you can be admitted here anytime, as well as being governor. Thanks so much.
I'm so sorry.
Big problem, right?
Somebody will clean that up,
No,
I
I'm
guess.
sure they will. This will all be,
You know my impulse
this will all
is to
be
get
right
down
done.
and pick
No,
on it.
that's right.